Boy, can you believe it? We're on week 15 of the summer, or not summer, excuse me, spring semester 2025. Man, this has felt like a very long semester just because I've been so busy with school and work and everything else. But it's crazy to think we're finally here at the end of it. I mean, next week is the last week of school. It's all done. So really cool stuff. So I want to wrap up some of the things I've been talking about in my classes lately. Most of it's coming down to these final research projects that I've got to do for each of my three classes. So to begin, in my interfaith class, the project that we have been asked to write about is how can we take the skills that we've been learning in interfaith work and mediation and apply them into some kind of a major conflict that's happening in the world today. And there were some fun ones in class. We had to do a 5 minute presentation on it just the other day. And so a bunch of us, about half the class is already presented. We're going to finish up next week. But some of the things that people were talking about were really interesting. Some of them were more of like, hey, I've got a challenge with a loved one in my life, and I want to be able to mediate that conflict. I want to work on how can we improve our communications things. Others were dealing with bigger issues of what about people who leave the church and are in conflict with those who stay in the church? What about those who are in different churches? What about those that are dealing with how do we handle taking care of our deceased loved ones in the, in burials and things from different traditions? So it was really cool, some fun stuff that people got into. So I wanted to share what I wrote about, what my paper was on, basically. So in um, in my life, I'm I have a I'm there's not much to me basically. When I was in grade school, man, I was the shy little kid that got picked on by everybody else. Um, and bullies picked on me. I got teased. I had some people who I thought were friends in high school, and come to find out, I was just there to be the laughing stock for them. I was the court jester for them, basically. So they kept me around so they could laugh at me. Um, I was hoping when I got out of high school that, and out of grade school, basically, that I could avoid all that stuff. Went on a mission for my church, and still ran into people who wanted to tease and bully me. Most of that was done behind my back on my mission, but there were still quite a few people who didn't like me and decided to go out of their way to spread lies and falsehoods about me. At least this is what my companions all told me when I was on my mission. So I got off my mission, got into college, started just doing my thing in college, going to school and stuff, got into entrepreneurship. And I thought, hopefully, my life will be better. I can get into entrepreneurship. I have a lot more say and control in my life and things. And so this should be good. Well, I found out in entrepreneurship, there are bullies. There are people like I've had customers rip me off, lie and cheat and steal from me. I've had employees that have tried to go behind my back on stuff. I've had partners who have not told me the full truth of things, who've made bad decisions, who have some stab me in the back, some, things happen. And I've had a lot of problems and challenges in my life. My life has not been easy. And we've struggled a lot through a lot of different things. Through all that, I realized that, this is in a way, in kind of a sad way, this is somewhat normal. Life wants to beat us down. Life wants to ruin us and to struggle, make us struggle, and wants us to do what it wants us to do. So in the world today, there is a major problem. And this problem originates all the way back to a story in the very beginning of the book of Genesis. In the book of Genesis, there's a story of Adam and Eve, first two men and women that was on the earth. And they had children, and two of their sons did not get along very well. Well, one of them didn't get along with his little brother, basically. That was Cain. Cain envied his brother. Cain wanted what his brother had. He was jealous of him. And so Cain fell into temptations and killed his brother so he could take his stuff. And in the stories, and most of this is found in the book of Moses, which is more of a specific LDS part of Scripture. But in the book of Moses, it goes into more detail into the nuance and conversations that were happening around this story. In there, as Cain is cursed by God for what he did for killing his brother Abel, Cain makes the comment that he is Master Mahan, the keeper of the great secret. Now, this great secret is the secret of how do I convert life into property? How do I take the life of someone and turn it into something that can benefit my wealth and my asset value? So that's this secret. Hugh Nibley, in some of his writings, talk about this Master Mahan principle based on this, that it's this idea of how can we expend the life of other people so that we can make more money and we can do more to improve our life. We see this in slavery. I think is a very classic example of this. Murder, obviously, if you got to get somebody out of the way so you can take their stuff or so that they don't hinder you in your progress in your politics or wealth or whatever. Those are common signs. Slavery is an easy one to look at, where you expend the life of others. You pay them poorly, you treat them poorly, all so that you can make more money yourself off their labors. Prostitution is another one. Selling yourself to make money. You're turning your life value into money that you can use to buy other things with, or selling other people's bodies so that you can make money off of them. And so this is where this Master Mahan principle comes from. And in a general sense, most of the major anxieties we have in this life are usually due to people who are trying to enrich themselves at the expense of everybody else. You can see this in class warfare with the exploitation of the poor by the wealth. The rich get richer, the poor get poor, kind of an idea. Corporate exploitations, other things like that we could point to, as well as concepts of this Master Mahan principle. So in my life, I have decided that I want to help change this in the life of an average person, basically. So I'm not trying to do like major interfaith stuff or major mediations between huge organizations or something. My goal is to make a difference in the life of the individual. I learned when I was in high school, and I have no idea why I did this, but in high school, I decided to start smiling at people. As I was walking down the hall, I thought, high school is hard, life sucks. Why don't I just smile and say hi to my friends as I'm walking down the hall? Why don't I try to offer a glimmer of hope? And I just decided to do it. I have no idea why. I don't remember the motivations or reasonings why I did that. I just did it. So I started to say hi to people as I walked down the halls in between classes. Nothing big, half-second type interactions with people. And I was surprised at the end of the year how many people signed to my yearbook. I had people going, "Hey, can I sign your yearbook?" I'm, "Oh yeah, sure." I was a band geek in high school and in junior high. I was not popular. I, to this day, still surprised at how many people I went to high school with that actually know who I am, because I didn't do much in high school. I just kind of hung out with my friends and we did our own thing. But when I was shocked when I was reading my yearbook that how many people told me stories of they looked forward to me seeing them in the hallway. They had bad days, but they knew their day would be good if they saw me in the hallway and I smiled and said hi. I had no idea the impact that a small act of service would give. So I just decided to keep doing that. I've done it ever since high school, basically. Just tried to help people through these small acts of kindness. And I've learned through this with further education and experiences in doing this, that if I make eye contact with somebody, if I can look them in the eye, then they know someone sees them. They are acknowledged. And if I can smile, and at least smile, if not even say hi to them, then they know that someone else cares. And if they know someone sees them, if they are acknowledged, and they know someone cares, then they have more hope. And as they have more hope in their life, that little nugget can help them to overcome a mountain of challenges. They may be wanting to commit suicide, but now they realize someone cares. That might be just enough. That little saying hi and just being friendly as you pass in the hallway might be just enough to keep someone from jumping off the edge. It might help people to just try a little harder, to be better, to improve. So it's these small, simple things that make a difference. Now, in this class, I didn't intend to become somewhat of a. I guess I'm a little. I'm known. Let me put it that way. I'm not trying to say I'm popular or nothing in my interfaith class, um, but I'm pretty well known. I'm surprised actually at how many people in the class know my name and are like, "Hey Curtis, how are you?" And I'm like, "Oh hey, you know." Still trying to remember everybody's names. Sometimes I confuse some of the people's names in there, but I made an effort to move around the room, and I disrupted a lot of people their patterns with doing this. So in my life, I like to move around in the rooms when I go to like classes and things, and even in church, I'll like move around in different places because it allows me to gain different perspective. It reminds me by moving around to gain different perspectives of what I'm learning, and it helps me to meet new people, to connect with new people, because everybody has these patterns. Everybody has these tendencies to want to sit in the same place. Humans are built that way to have patterns and habits, and because they usually sit where they sit, if I move around, I can now meet other people and talk with other people and get to know more people. So I did this in the class, and my goal was to hopefully, and I didn't mean this to be like an experiment. I didn't think about this turning into some kind of a final paper for the class, but it just kind of worked out that way. That my goal was to just offer a glimmer of hope to my fellow students in the class, and I hope I did a good job. I don't know if you were in the class, if you're in my friends in the Chad's class are watching this, and you want to put comments on what you thought. Awesome, that'd be fun. I'd love to reconnect with you. Um, I just tried to be a glimmer of hope. College can be hard and rough, and the looks on most people's faces at the beginning of that class were not positive. They were just, oh, another class, and I got more homework, and I got all this stuff to do. So I just tried to be a glimmer of hope for everybody. And yes, I'm a student going through the whole process myself. So that's what I did, and that's what I wrote on for that class. And so my challenge to you is take the time and help more people. So I'll tell you a bit of experiment I did on campus this semester as well. For one of my classes that's a little bit later in the day, I usually have some time to get to the school early and have some study time. So I usually sit in the hallway of one of the buildings, and so while I'm sitting there doing my studies, I notice people as they walk by. And I've done this outside of this in my own, at church. I've done this. I've done this at seminars and conferences I've attended. I've done this just in the grocery store and other things. Here's what I want you to do is I want you to walk around, and I want you to keep your head up looking forward. And I want you, as people come towards you, I want you to just look them in the eye. Okay? Look them in the eye and just have a friendly smile on your face, basically, as you walk by. That's it. Nothing fancy. If you want to say hi, or if they say hi, you can say hi back. That's okay. But watch what happens, okay? When I did this experiment on campus in the hallway, probably more than 90% of the people would walk by me and not look in my directions. I saw several people, like, their eye would come to the corner of their eye, like they're kind of looking over at me to see what is he going to do, what's going to happen, and but they wouldn't turn their head to look at me. Over 90% of the people, and these are some students, but mostly teachers, mostly administrators, would not acknowledge I even existed. And that is sad. That is absolutely terrible. We see this in the grocery stores. We see this at church. People come in, they look down, they go to where they're going to sit, and they just ignore everybody else, and they're afraid to talk to other people. Guys, this is that Master Mahan principle devaluing you and convincing you to devalue other people. It all comes together with that. It's time to look at people. It's time to acknowledge people. It's time to add value to their life. So next time you're at church, next time you're at the grocery store, if you're still on campus going to classes, walk around and you can do this. You can go to the mall and do this. You can go anywhere and do this. Walk around and look people in the eye and just have a friendly smile on your face as they look back at you. That's it. You don't even have to talk to them. And it might seem really awkward and weird to do at first, but here's what's fascinating. As you do this, you'll notice how many people purposefully are avoiding contact with you. They don't want to have eye contact with you at all. People don't believe in themselves. People devalue themselves. And by devaluing themselves, they default devalue other people. This is something we need to change. We need to be better at valuing other people, respecting other people. So I recommend doing this challenge. Go do this challenge and then come back and comment on the video. In fact, what happened when you did this? When you went to the store and you walked around and this happened, or when you were at work and you walked around and tried to just look everybody in the eye and just give a nice friendly smile to them. What happened? How many people didn't? How many people avoided you, didn't look at you? How many people did? And did that change the quality of the interactions with those people? It's profound how amazing this simple little act can be. So I recommend doing that. Okay, let's jump on to my other classes. In my historical research class, we're doing World War I. I'm doing research on food, how the basically standard American diet was changed during World War I. Absolutely fascinating. I had no idea how much our diet today is based on stuff that started in World War I. Did you realize that in World War I is where nutrition science really started to take off? And the biggest reason they did this is because the average American in the early 20th century, their diet consisted of bread, it consisted of alcohol, it consisted of ground beef or steaks, some kind of red meats, and potatoes. And that's kind of what it was. There wasn't much else. Sometimes you'd have like some not even some cereals, but like sometimes you do like some grains, like some oatmeal or something for breakfast. But usually it was like eggs, cheese, dairy, stuff like that. And that was kind of it. The problem is during the war, those staples were hard to acquire because they needed to send a lot of food over to Europe to help our soldiers to fight. Europe, all their men were off fighting the war, and all the fields were being bombed and mined, and so they lost their capacity to grow their own food. There wasn't much they could do. There's bombing raids at night, and there's all these other challenges and stuff, and so they were struggling to barely survive, let alone grow their own food. And manufacturing plants were being blown up, and all kinds of problems were happening over there. So America had to help by sending food over to Europe to feed the Europeans and feed the soldiers. The soldiers needed a diet that was consisting of about 4,000 calories per day. Because of all the marching and movements and fighting and activities they were doing, they needed a 4,000 calorie diet at minimum to keep functioning. But then you also have everybody here in the United States that didn't go fight the war that still need to eat. So wheat was just, prices went sky high. So demand went up, supply went way down. Lots of problems happened with that. Same with lots of other foods that main staples like sugar and other things. Just the war threw it all out of whack. So the U.S. had to do some major conservation. So where the Food Administration came from. And Herbert Hoover put the Food Administration, was the first director of it. He got it organized. So sacrificing, only eating 2 meals instead of 3 meals a day, or even get down to 1 meal a day. Wheatless Wednesdays, meatless Mondays. Those were things to slow the demand for food in America so they can ship it overseas. Now, another thing that they did was they started encouraging people to diversify their diet. They started encouraging people to eat other foods like fish, like other grains, your rye and your barleys and oats and other things, instead of just wheat. they started encouraging people to have vegetables and all other fruits. So it was really interesting because when you think about it, the average diet of a minority in America, so poor people like blacks and other minorities, and really poor white families, they had to broaden their food options rapidly to survive because they couldn't afford the main staples. It just got too expensive. So they had to diversify and started eating, greens and cornmeal and other things like that. And so during the war, the U.S. government, through the Food Administration, told everybody start eating greens and cornmeal and other things like that. This actually when cornbread. We think of cornbread as like this popular food from the South, but it wasn't actually eaten much in the United States outside of the South until World War One. World War One made cornbread a more common thing to be eaten because it wasn't wheat. It was that corn was easier to grow. You're able to produce more yield and get more crops done, and it lowered the amount of wheat you had to use if you used cornmeal, if you mixed in some rye and some oat flour and other things in there as well. So casseroles started to become a thing. Casseroles weren't much of a thing before the World War One because you just had your main diets. You cooked, you had your bread made, then you buttered your bread and had a piece next to your plate. You had your potatoes that were boiled or stewed, and you had those there to cook and eat. You had your steak and maybe some peas or something, and that was kind of the main diet. It was all separated. Well, casseroles is where you take a bunch of different kinds of foods and throw them all together. And casseroles were invented during World War One, and then they continued after that through the Depression and other areas. They had a grocery store started to come around this time, but the thing that's fascinating is the average poor person's diet became the main American diet. It's really interesting because it was conservation, so they had to encourage people to diversify their diet. What they found as part of the justification for this was nutritional science. In nutritional science, they started looking at how can we prove that these other foods are good for people to eat, because not many people had done collard greens or other things like that, just the poor people. So they had to tell the more affluent people, you need to eat these. So that's where nutrition science really emerged, was as they studied it to try to justify and prove to people why you want to eat these other foods, they realized that the poor person's diet actually was a lot healthier than the standard American diet was. It was so fascinating. So a lot of that originates from the time of World War One. So that's what that paper's on, and I'll get into more details and maybe even read the paper to you next week or something, because I'm on a first draft right now. I'm going to get feedback from several students and from my professor, and then edit it and improve it and get a final draft done. Hopefully either by the next weekend. Basically, is what I'm trying to do. So that'll be a fun one to talk about next week. In my textual analysis class, we spent some time talking about Joseph and his life a little bit more, and comparing, contrasting it. Man, his family life was messed up. Let's just be honest about this, okay? His family life was crazy. So we've heard of Joseph in his young years. He was sold into Egypt, and his brothers hated him. All his brothers were practically adults, and they just hated their little brother because the little brother was the first son of Jacob's favorite wife. Okay, remember, Jacob ended up with 4 wives, not because he wanted them, but because other people said he should have them. So he got his first wife because his father-in-law tricked him into marrying he wanted to marry Rachel. And he worked for 7 years for his father-in-law to marry Rachel. On his wedding night, his father-in-law switched Rachel with Leah, Rachel's older sister, tricked Joseph into basically consummating the marriage with Leah, which meant now they were married and things, and then he could get married to Rachel later. And then there's some infertility, so Rachel gave her servant to Jacob as a surrogate, basically, for Rachel's kids. And then Rachel later got pregnant herself. That was Joseph and Benjamin. And then Leah had a bout of non-childbearing years, so she gave her servant as well, not to be outdone by Rachel, her little sister. And so That's how Jacob got 4 wives. Joseph, of course, he's the firstborn of Rachel. Rachel was Jacob's favorite wife, and so Joseph was a favored son. And all of his older brothers, his 10 older brothers, resented him for this. That's why they decided, let's kill him. Let's get rid of him. We hate him. Reuben said no. Let's throw him in a pit and then let the wild animals eat him. Reuben's goal was actually come back and get Joseph out of it, not let him die. Judah went about a whole different path. He looked at it from an economic standpoint and said, no, let's sell him into slavery. Then we can make some money. And so they're like, oh, okay. And they sold him to the Midianites, who took him into Egypt and sold him to as a servant into the house of Potiphar, who was a person who basically kind of led. He was a magistrate that kind of oversaw all the jail and police systems in Egypt at the time. And of course, Potiphar's wife decides, hey, this Hebrew guy is pretty hot. I want to sleep with him. So I'm going to seduce him to sleep with me. And Joseph resisted. And it's fascinating because we get the story of Joseph being sold into slavery. Okay, chapter 37, I think, of Genesis. Then chapter 38 of Genesis is the story of Judah being immoral. And then the story of Joseph is chapter 39, where he resists immorality. So it's interesting when the Bible scholars put these things together, it's just fascinating how they did this. When the Bible's put together, the scholars that put together what we know of as the Old Testament today didn't have original documents. They were most likely working off of oral traditions, and there were probably several oral traditions that had evolved because stories tend to shift and adjust over time. If you've ever done that telephone game, imagine trying to write a book, do the telephone game. If you remember that, where you say one thing to the person next to you and then they say it to the person next to them. What if you took all those stories and had to write one narrative based on all those stories that it evolved into over time in the telephone game? If you took all the different stories, like if you had everybody write down what they thought they heard, and then you had to take someone take all of those stories of what they thought they heard, and then compile it into one narrative. That's what the Bible is, basically. The Bible is predominantly based on oral tradition that was written down later. So they're compiling this together, which is why sometimes the stories jump on facts or miss things, or the timeline seems to be really skewed in some of them. They're trying to put it together. And then sometimes past scholars try to look at the scriptures from a literary standpoint or a metaphorical standpoint. And so they started looking at how can we organize the stories to teach, kind of like an Aesop's fable type idea, but using these stories from history. But then framing them in a way so that how they're framed, how the story is structured, what facts we give and what facts we don't give are meant to help enhance the story. So when you compile these different factors together, that's the Bible. That's what we get, basically, especially in the Old Testament. So they contrast Judah and Joseph together. We contrast these things. We can see the contrast between when Judah lost his wife, he mourned her, but then moved on pretty quick. When Jacob lost Rachel, he seems to not get over that one. And he kind of holds on to Joseph. And then Joseph gets killed, or actually, it's fascinating because all the brothers did is they took Joseph's coat, they killed the lamb, spread some of the blood on the coat, took it back and said, Dad, here's Joseph's coat. Is this his coat, right? Yeah. And then let Joseph come to his own conclusions to how let Jacob come to his own conclusions how Joseph died. So it's just fascinating how this works out. One way that is common to look at history is realizing that is to use a modern lens, to look at it from our perspective, looking backwards on history. One of the papers we read this week was really interesting. It was actually kind of taking a queer theory look at the story of Joseph, which sounds really strange. So what it is it's taking a perspective of how can we understand modern concepts of being gay through looking at the story of Joseph. This was really interesting. So this article is not saying that we believe Joseph was gay. What they're saying is there's things that gays today can learn from understanding the story of Joseph. You got to think about it. Here's a young man who has dreams and visions, so he's a very creative person. He's given a coat from his dad that is full of lots of color, that he's hated and persecuted by his family. He is kicked out and ostracized from his family and not valued at all by other people until they see his value later on, and is tempted with lots of sexual temptations and challenges and issues and things as well. So when you look at the Joseph story from that perspective, and then look at how that parallels with how gays are treated today, you can kind of see there's actually some parallels there. It's really wild to think about. But the reason I bring this up is I want to point out the idea that sometimes we look at history from a modern perspective, and while it's not a good or bad thing, it's just a thing. Okay, understand that. It's not bad to look at history from a modern perspective, but realize that that's not a good way to establish the truth about the past, is to use a modern perspective looking backwards. We have to evaluate the past based on the rules that they followed in the past. Okay, a classic example of this is slavery. Today's world, we do not like slavery. We abhor slavery. It's a bad, terrible thing. Some people have gone so far as to even take modern slavery ideas and belittle historical figures from the past who practiced slavery, like some of the founding fathers, pulling statues down and stuff because we hate slavery, and so we're going to judge the past based on present values. And this happens all the time. But here's the interesting thing: when it comes to like the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament, slavery was normal. We may hate it and not like it today at all, which is completely fine for us to do. But the people in the Bible, they lived at a time where slavery was normal. It was accepted. There's many scriptures in the Bible, in fact, even in the New Testament, where Paul condones it. He's not rejecting it. He's not pushing against it. Even it almost shows that God is encouraging slavery. He's not pushing against it. He even tells Hagar in Genesis, go back to being a slave to Sarah. He doesn't say you're right to to rally your power as a black woman and to get away from that and go away from the family that was putting you into slavery. No, God told Hagar, go back to being a slave for Sarah because it'd work out for her benefit in the long run. So slavery was condoned. That doesn't mean it's condoned today. And it doesn't mean we should read into the Bible that that's the way it should be today. It's just the way it was back then. So we can look at the past with a perspective from today to gain insight for today, but it doesn't mean that's the truth of the past. So we have to be careful how we look at the past and examine those things. Just as important as looking at the past from a modern perspective, we need to look at the past from a past perspective. They thought it was fine back then. Today we look at things like homosexuality as a bad issue. Back then, the only issue is the man on the bottom. That's the only heinous, blasphemous part of sex. The man cannot be on the bottom. That was it. So it's just a different perspective. Okay, so it's good to look from both perspectives on that to help us gain better perspective of what really was going on. So my paper for that class is on Hagar and Sarah and changes of women's status that we see through that. So I'm refining that paper down, getting it written right now. And so I'll talk more about that paper next week as well as we wrap up this semester. So thanks for following. I hope you guys enjoy these videos. Like the videos, subscribe to the channel would be great. So you can watch the other videos. I've got some ideas of other things. I'm going to let you in on some of the research I've been doing as we go through this summer. I have signed up for fall semester, and I'm looking forward to fall semester. So I'm taking the summer off from actively attending school, but man, do I have a lot of research to do this summer. I've got some personal research to do. I've got a ton of books to read. So I'm going to give you some more insight into that research and into those books this summer. So stay tuned. We'll see you then.